All right, hey guys. Hey, somebody had mentioned in the comments they were having a little trouble with their Ventaway, Luxor Ventaway American Standard toilet, and they had to manually pull the paddle back. So I'll give you a couple tips on this, guys. There's a couple different things that can cause that. Now, first of all, and they also asked if you can take the Ventaway mechanism out and the toilet would still work. Yes, you can. This one's disabled because the original fill valve was defective, so I disabled it, but you have to leave the backflow preventer in here because your paddle, your little flush paddle there is attached to this diverter, because that's what actually activates the diverter when you flush. But you have to have this because this also has that little tab there which pulls your chain to your flush bucket. Now, one of the things you can check, if that chain has got too much slack in it, when that flush bucket, if it's actually closing, that won't pull the flat back, because when that flush bucket drops, it pulls the chain which pulls the paddle back. So that's one thing to check. Also, make sure your handle's not real stiff, or if you push the handle out and it's sticking that way to push the paddle open. So make sure this is, you can use a little WD-40 or something on this. I don't recommend oiling anything in the toilet, guys. It will work for a while, but I worked with plumbers, and from experience, if you WD-40 stuff that's sticking, what happens is, oil and water don't mix, for one. Yeah, it'll lubricate it for a while and it'll work really good, but what'll happen is it'll develop a greasy, like white paste over time that'll start causing things to actually get worse. It'll actually make stuff stick. So I don't recommend it. I mean, people can do what they want. I'm not, saying that, but anyway, back to the deal here. Another thing is that flush bucket. That's called a flush bucket on American Standard. Now, not just the Luxor Ventaways have it. A lot of the regular American Standard toilets, the older ones, will have that as well. Like the Cadets and the Peebleys and stuff, they'll have that on the older toilets too. There's a little hole in the bottom of the cylinder here on this top of this flush bucket. And if that little hole gets clogged, if you can see here very well, this cylinder here, if that little hole in the bottom gets clogged and the water doesn't drain out, it won't want to close. You'll have to manually close it. What it does is when this opens, the water drains out of that cylinder, and then the whole thing will close. The whole flush bucket closes, which closes your seal disc down there. I'll show you how this works. Now you can see it's draining. Water is draining out of that little cylinder, and when it gets all the way empty, the flush bucket will close. Closing the disc, the flapper will close, and the paddle will go back to the position. That's how it's supposed to work. So that's what you want to check for, is make sure that little hole's open so the water can drain out of that cylinder, and make sure your chain is just the right length. There's not too much slack where when it drops, it won't pull the paddle back. The mechanism. This one's still hooked up, even though the valve is gone for it, so it doesn't work. It won't vent away. But if you leave the mechanism in here like I did with this one, I just have the water line disconnected because the original fill valve was gone. This is just a standard $12 1B1 fill valve I got from a local hardware store. But as you can see, I have the fill valve, or the fill hose, the rim bowl, your bowl fill tube going. It connects down here. I don't know if you can see it. Probably not going to be able to. There, right there. This has to have water in it because there's a trap inside here. And if this doesn't have water in it, if the water evaporates or gets out of here, you can see inside there's water in there, your toilet will not siphon out. It'll stop siphoning. It'll just spin around the bowl and it will not siphon the water out of the tank because it's got a vacuum. It'll lose its vacuum. You'll have an air leak, so it will not siphon out. If you take this mechanism out, which you can, you'll have to plug the hole in the bottom of the tank with like a rubber plug or a sealant and seal that hole off, and then you can use the toilet just fine. Now, with the water going here, it still goes in here and fills in through the rim. So the bowl still fills. So that's what I did. Those are just some simple things to check, guys. I have another video on my channel of the other American Standard Ventaway toilet I had that I took this out, and you can see how I plugged that up. So those are just some things to check, and yeah, you can operate without it. This one still is here. The mechanism doesn't work, but I had this still hooked up with water going through it so that it doesn't lose the vacuum there and not siphon out. So just some things to check for, guys. All right, thanks for watching.